Hello, let's do a review of The Club by Leo Damarosk. This is The Club, Johnson, Boswell, and the Friends Who Shaped an Age. So in 1764, Johnson and Joshua Reynolds, the portrait painter, the great portrait painter of that era, formed a club, maybe primarily to kind of cheer up Johnson, who was a very melancholic, depressed figure, but also one who enjoyed conversation and the battle of conversation. This was a great era for dudes. This was definitely a club of dudes, all to jousting to you see who can get the better of each other. Now it is a book that is about the club, but really the club is like with another nonfiction book that I have just read, the library book, which was all supposedly based around an LA fire. This one, the club, is based around is around the idea of this club, but really is primarily kind of a portrait of the two main figures that get mentioned in that subtitle of Samuel Johnson, the maker of one of the first great English dictionaries. Also, kind of his collected works of Shakespeare with its introductions, his lives of the poets, his essays. Kind of a great literary critical figure of the 1700s, and then his biographer, James Boswell, a Scot who his great claim to fame, if it isn't his all his journals, is this big biography of Johnson, which is considered one of the kind of the texts for modern biography, where he did a soup to nuts biography of Johnson, with heavily weighted to that last quarter of Johnson's life, where Boswell could actually knew him and recorded in quite brilliant ways their conversations, oftentimes at this club that Reynolds and Johnson founded in 1764. Johnson didn't get admitted until much later, and probably due to the influence of Johnson is the only reason he got in. He was considered quite the lightweight, and indeed, I'm sure all the way up to when he actually released. Almost all the way up until he released his great biography of Johnson, they probably would have had quite a good argument for it. Now, so as such, the earlier chapters of this book are like Johnson before Boswell. Pre his fame, he was someone who kind of came from not from very humble beginnings, was very much kind of a starving hack writer in London, working for all his thing. And it was only much later in his life that he got that fame, recognition, got a pension, that he was able to kind of to be a little bit more set up. And also got entry because of his great fame, especially with his dictionary and stuff like that, into the kind of the lives of a more kind of an upper crust thing. So and we also get we get Boswell before Johnson. Boswell, a Scotsman, in navigating the waters of England, where there's very much kind of looking down on the Scots, especially for their support of Bonnie Prince Charles, and not Bonnie the Bonnie Prince and all that. Just like not they were very much on the outs, as the Scots often were. Scottish father myself. So, but he was also he had journals, which means there's a great font of information for Leo Damarosh to go into. Sometimes to its fault of Boswell kind of records all his kind of complicated activities. He was a drunkard. He was constantly using prostitutes. Was Boswell does not come off well in this book. He is someone who his one great talent was I actually recording what Johnson had to say, even if he would interject his own kind of rather more banal opinions in there. At least he actually did record Johnson, and oftentimes Johnson slapping him down for being such an idiot. But the great thing, so we have that, which is like sort of you get to have all the interesting bits of the biography of Johnson and of Boswell, and because Boswell didn't really like the women in Johnson's life, you also get to hear about women like Hester Thrale, people like that, who Johnson actually had much more rich and interesting friendships and conversations with women, whereas Boswell, you sort of get the impression that Boswell was sort of just there for the sex. For when it came to women, didn't really particularly respect them, as was probably much more the norm of the time, and also had a lot more kind of the retrograde attitudes towards stuff like slavery, which Johnson was very much against, but Boswell was like, oh no, we should have slavery, and it's because people are happier if they're enslaved. Talking about the happy slaves in like the Bahamas and stuff like that, where we know from historical record, happiness, hell on earth would have been a better way to describe the conditions going on there, and the despicable things that the people who are extracting lots and lots of money to fund fund enlightenment and kind of civilization back home were doing to extract that money. So we have the interesting portraits of those two guys, but we also get, because of this kind of conceit as the club, is we get little mini biographies of other people in the club, which really build up kind of just the picture of this age, the attitudes, the very different attitudes of the age. We get Joshua Reynolds to start off with, who seems to have that great talent as a portraitist, a popular commercial, made a lot of money portraits. Also, really take a look at his art and see how much you like it one way or the other. But he was great at capturing the likeness of someone while casting that in probably the best and most positive light, so you'd actually want to get painted by him and pay him lots of money to do that. You have David Garrick, who is a former student of Johnson, who they sort of both left the hometown together and came to London. And Garrick was the one who shot to fame as a great actor of Shakespeare, as a playwright himself, as a theater manager, as a director. He is somebody who seems to have brought in a lot more of we're going to actually rehearse these plays. We're actually going to try and put these plays, where the actors actually relate to each other on stage, not just stand there and declaim speeches off into space. It's like, no, this is like interacting, so it kind of bringing to life Shakespeare. And see, he seems to have been one of the key components, Johnson probably being one of the others, that started to actually elevate Shakespeare from well-respected playwright to this kind of symbol of a great English literature, of the god Shakespeare, the bard, that idea. So you get kind of a little portrait of that. You get Oliver Goldsmith. You get someone like Edward Gibbon, who wrote the famous historian who wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which Damaros notes, if he had published that before he had gotten into the club, he wouldn't have gotten into the club, because any member could blackball him. And both Johnson and Boswell hated him and called him the infidel, because he was a rather skeptic on the whole thing because Christianity comes up through the Roman Empire, and that is the received wisdom was, well, this is the foreordained, divinely kind of impressed true religion, so of course it would come up. And Gibbon was much more of I can't prove, as a historian, I can't prove any of this sacred stuff. Probably didn't actually believe in that sacred stuff. So I'm just going to look at the historical factors of why Christianity became the great state religion of the Roman Empire, and thus spread out throughout the world and became the successful cult that it has become. So yeah, you get some really good, interesting kind of viewpoints of, how Johnson and how Boswell kind of, Boswell, who's very kind of just redundant, but how someone like Johnson is, very religious man, seemed to be a religious man because of his own kind of inner demons, kind of rejected someone like Gibbon. You have Adam Smith, the great a philosophical economist, with a wealth of nations, and his kind of like, you kind of get get a view, you get a picture of economics at those times, and kind of of a little bit of Adam Smith's kind of thoughts. It's one of those things that's completely out of my depth of, but it like kind of dips you into that. So it's really fascinating to get all these different people who are swirling around Johnson, and not just get kind of an isolated picture of Johnson or of Boswell, but to get an era, this thing of like, it is the friends, Johnson, Boswell, and the friends who shaped an age. Really is a great book for, yes, you get a really good picture of both of Johnson and Boswell. Sometimes I feel like he got too much Boswell in this book, just because I don't think Damarosk likes him very much. He's a pathetic, venereal, rotting with venereal disease kind of a figure. But because of that, you also get just so much other stuff in there that gives you maybe gives a slight idea of what it would be like, what people were walking around with in their heads at the time. Yeah. Oh, and Edmund Burke, for the political, great Irish politician who his family had just recently kind of converted from Catholicism to Protestantism, so he could actually hold office, because at this point you had no rights, you had no civil rights as a Catholic in the larger political sphere. And his great speeches and his great battles, the ideas of the ideas of empire in this book, the idea of, we're going to do all these wars so that we can get stuff. This is when we have the French Revolution happening, we have the American Revolution happening. It's actually really good at showing something where Samuel Johnson was someone who was very much against these revolutions, because he saw he saw the great chaos, the great danger underneath, which it's that may you live in interesting times. Like, yeah, this is great advancements that propelled our culture forward, but if you were living there on the ground floor as it happened, you could really get killed. You could get killed. Your way of life could go away. You could get guillotined. There was maybe, it gives you a good sense of, like, maybe, hey, legitimate fear, even if at the same time people like Burke, who are like doing incremental stuff of like saying, I'm a very low-born man, but he spent his career supporting the idea that there should be a small, educated class of nobles whose paternal thing was to take care of society and to order it and to kind of tamp down the beast. And you look at someone like Johnson on a personal level, Damaros does enough to sort of suggest there was a lot of roiling, angry passions, different kinds of passions within him. Don't know if I still quite accept all the S&M stuff that he slides in there for a couple of a chapter or so, but you can get that idea of that someone like Johnson's the psychology of, no, I feel that kind of roiling chaos in myself, and I can see that in wider society, and why they might react to stuff like the French Revolution and the American Revolution that way. And I mean, the French Revolution wildly spinning out of control, and it does become a horrible bloodbath. But yeah. So I felt like I got inside the heads, however slightly, through this book. So yeah, really interesting book. If you're at all interested of that era, I would highly recommend it. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.